All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like we have quite a few participants on this call. So just going to ask that folks keep yourself muted if you are not talking. And when we do have our speakers who are workers giving your remarks, if you could have your cameras on for when you're speaking, because I know we've got some TV folks on here, I believe, too, and that would be helpful. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Katie Baker, and I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Public Sector Labor Coalition, which is made up of Virginia AFL-CIO, AFSCME, the American Federation of Teachers, AAUP, the Communications Workers of America, which also represents our campus workers, SEIU Virginia 512, the Virginia Education Association, the Virginia Professional Firefighters, Unite Here, and the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 400. And collectively, we represent hundreds of thousands of workers across the Commonwealth. And we're here today because workers all across Virginia are calling on the General Assembly to reject the governor's substitute that guts the historic collective bargaining legislation that the General Assembly sent to her desk that would allow more than 500,000 Virginia workers the freedom to collectively bargain for fair wages, benefits, and working conditions. Um, I cannot I cannot overstate that the changes to this bill amount to a substantial rewrite. There are dozens of changes in the bill. So instead of going each through each one line to line by line, I just want to highlight a few of the bigger ones, and I think even more importantly, how they interact to weaken the ability of workers to negotiate meaningful contracts. Um, so, number one, and this is one of the biggest issues for workers, is that all of our local workers for local governments and for school boards who don't currently have a collective bargaining agreement with their localities are going to be forced to wait until the next decade for collective bargaining rights. We're talking about 2030 that this date is being pushed back to. And these are workers who have already been waiting for decades. And you're going to hear from several of those workers today who are going to be forced to wait longer and talk about what that would mean to them. But because of other changes in the bill, it's not just like, oh, we get to 2030 and finally everything's going to be great and we're all going to have strong collective bargaining rights. Because 2030 could take us into a new and potentially a Republican administration. And there are changes in the bill that remove a lot of the worker protections that were written into the code in the General Assembly bill that passed and move them into the purview of the regulatory process and the Public Employee Relations Board. I and the governor is the one who appoints who is on the Public Employee Relations Board. So, Leader Surville, I noticed in an article in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, had pointed out giving a Republican governor the opportunity to define what is a fair and free election is a union busting tactic. And I know VEA, you've phrased it very poignantly in calling this a kill switch because it essentially could stop collective bargaining dead in its tracks without a single vote from the General Assembly. And then, so let's say we get to 2030, you're organizing, but the rewrite of the bill also fails to lay out the things that you are guaranteed to be able to bargain over. So things like your working conditions, your overtime, your equipment, your benefits. And I know those things are very important to all workers, particularly workers like firefighters who do need a lot of equipment and who I know are understaffed. And Kurt, our firefighter, is going to speak to that. So, you know, getting collective bargaining rights in 2030, there's not even a guarantee that you're going to be able to bargain over those very foundational terms of employment. And that would actually put Virginia below the standards of the National Labor Relations Board. So we are setting a lower bar than what the federal government would currently have in terms of those labor protections. Um, and then another huge issue is that the governor's version of the bill adds the word advisory to arbitration. Arbitration processes are typically binding in the legal process, so that if you reach an impasse during negotiations, or if you have a dispute over the contract and how it's being forced itself with management, uh, that's like, going to an arbiter who's supposed to be a neutral, third party decision maker to help resolve that, kind of like a judge, but then their opinion doesn't really count. It's management still actually gets to decide that outcome. So it's a bit of an exercise in futility. So taken as a whole, and how all these parts come together, is ultimately a net negative in a lot of ways, because it lowers the bar for what many of our workers have achieved in the localities that do have collective bargaining rights. So I hope that is a helpful overview, just because I know there were so many changes to the bill, and I know I've talked to some reporters who were, trying to take the time to parse through them. But with that, I want to turn it over to Kurt Dietrich, who is a Portsmouth firefighter, who's going to talk a little bit about what some of those changes would mean to firefighters in Portsmouth. Kurt.
Thank you. My name is Kurt Dietrich. I'm a vice president for the Virginia Professional Firefighters, which represents over 10,700 firefighters and paramedics across the Commonwealth. We're here today calling on the Virginia General Assembly to reject the governor's substitute, and calling on Governor Spanberger to sign the collective bargaining bill that both chambers of the General Assembly passed. The governor's substitute delays collective bargaining rights for local government employees until January 1st, 2030. And every professional firefighter and paramedic in Virginia works for a local government. That means the governor is asking us to wait until she is out of office, until the next decade. That's not a compromise, that's a delay. So let me tell you what collective bargaining means for the communities that we serve. It means that firefighters and paramedics can sit down with their city or county governments and have real, meaningful conversations about staffing levels, about training standards, and about equipment that meets the demands of the modern fire service. Things like safety standards that protect the men and women who run into burning buildings while everyone else runs out. Right now, we don't have that. Right now, a fire chief or a city manager can make decisions that affect how we respond to your 911 emergencies. Decisions about how many people we have on a fire truck, what equipment we carry, what our level of training is. And we have no formal way to say if that's safe for our members and the public that we serve. And the decision that is often made is made by people that take no input from the people that actually do the work. It's made by people who have never responded to fires or medical emergencies and have no idea of the workload and the demands our firefighters and paramedics face across the Commonwealth. Under the governor's substitute, there's not even a guarantee that firefighters would be able to negotiate staffing levels, training standards, and equipment, because there's no protection for our scope of bargaining. Collective bargaining fixes that, not just for us, but for the communities that we protect. Virginia is one of the last states in the country to give public employees these rights. We've been fighting for this for years. The General Assembly passed the bill, both chambers. They did their job. We're asking that the governor do hers. Reject the substitute, sign the bill, and don't make Virginia's firefighters and paramedics wait until next decade for rights that are long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kurt. And next, we will have Tia Littlejohn Adams, who is a member of AFSCME and an accountant for the city of Alexandria. Tia.
My name is Tia Littlejohn Adams. I'm an accountant for the city of Alexandria. I've spent more than 24 years in public service. My husband is a firefighter, so serving our community is part of who we are. We've built our lives around helping our community stronger. This is why I'm here today, because the decisions made in the legislature directly affects the people who keep our communities running. I'm calling on the legislature to reject Governor Spanberger's substitute collective bargaining bill and ask the governor to support the original pro-worker bill that was sent to her desk. Thousands of local employees across Virginia have spent years organizing, passing local ordinances, and building unions so that we can have a real voice at the table. We fought for standards that protect fairness, including binding arbitration, where a neutral third party makes the final decision when workers and employers can't agree. The governor's substitute bill would turn binding arbitration into advisory arbitration. And if the decision is only a suggestion, what incentive does an employer have to negotiate in good faith? This bill weakens the rights we've already fought so hard for to win, and there is nothing pro-worker about that. Thank you.
Oh, I was on mute. Thank you so much for those remarks. And next, we have Catherine Brown, who is a teacher from Waynesboro.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the press and fellow union members. My name is Catherine Brown. I'm an elementary school teacher at Winona Elementary School in Waynesboro. I'm the president of the Waynesboro Education Association and proud member of the Virginia Education Association. I want to talk with you today about how the bill substitute will affect all public school employees. First and foremost, the substitute relegates all local government employees to second-class citizenship because we will not enjoy the same protections and rights given to state workers under the new law until 2030. There's no policy rationale for this delay. School boards are already making decisions about our working conditions, which are also students' conditions. The General Assembly bill simply allows us to be part of that conversation. And we deserve to be part of that conversation because we are with the students and we know what the needs are. We are all public servants. We're all driven by the mission of service to our communities. There's no reason to draw lines between workers based on who their employer is. That's already the problem with the system under which we have been operating since 2020. Furthermore, the union is the workers. When Waynesboro Education Association finally gets to sit down at the bargaining table with Waynesboro Public Schools, it will be teachers, custodians, bus drivers, nurses, paraprofessionals, and school cafeteria workers sitting down at that table. The idea that local government needs to be protected by the Public Employee Relations Board from their own workforce demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how bargaining works and distrust of the public servants who are working with our children, saving lives, and caring for our elderly and disabled communities. Finally, I want to speak to the fact that under the bill substitution, my fellow public school employees and I would not have the protections necessary to organize for mutual aid and support. Retaliation is real. 5 bus drivers in Richmond were fired just for attending a school board meeting last year to speak up about their working conditions. Thankfully, their union was able to negotiate for their reinstatement, but without any local resolution, we will be on our own. We're calling on the General Assembly to please vote no to the substitution. Protect the rights of all Virginia's public servants and return the original bill to Governor Spanberger to sign. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And next, we will have Athena Jones from Portsmouth, who is a home care worker and chair of the home care chapter of SEIU Virginia 512.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Yes, my name is Athena Jones. I've been a home care worker for more than 12 years, and I'm proud to serve on the home care chapter of SEIU Virginia 512 as chapter chair. I'm here today united because unfortunately there is still work that has to be done to win collective bargaining rights that we deserve. For more than 2 decades, home care providers were united with city and county workers in SEIU Virginia 512. We organized for our freedom to collectively bargain. Our home care workforce, predominantly Black and Brown women, provide the essential care that allows seniors and people with disabilities to live safely at their homes. Yet, we are paid $13.88 an hour in most of Virginia. And over 53% of our workforce rely on public assistance to survive. And so collective bargaining rights are needed to ensure that home care workers have what we need. We can get together to bargain for health care, bargain for wages and working conditions. But the changes put forward by the governor's Spanberger's office undermine that intent. And that bill actually weakens protections for workers and the delaying its implementations. The governor's substitution bill removes the guarantee for protections from the bill itself. So instead of giving future administrations the power to decide what we can and can't do, meaning that, we're talking about a potential anti-union governor who could upend the process that should ensure that we have a seat at the table. These substitutions also take away the guarantee that workers can negotiate for working condition and benefits, which are the foundation of what the bargaining process is. Home care workers make all work possible. Every day, we help seniors, we help people with disabilities live safely in their homes instead of being forced to live into institutions. The care strengthens families. We support communities and help Virginia invest in care and home care rather than more costly alternatives. It is essential. It is life-sustaining work. Yet home care workers are paid poverty wages with no health care, no real protections. And the substitute version of this bill does not create a meaningful pathway with protections needed to change this reality. SEIU Virginia 512 remains vigilant, and we are united in our fight for a seat at the table because we know Virginia is better when workers have a voice and a job, and we can make that difference. Whether you're a home care worker, a higher education worker, or a city employee, we all deserve the right to form a union and collectively bargain. It shouldn't matter what your zip code is. We're grateful for the work that we have done in the General Assembly to pass comprehensive bill that protects the rights of Virginia's workers. As it stands, we cannot accept Governor Spanberger's version of this bill, but we stand united in calling for the General Assembly to reject these changes and calling for the Governor Spanberger to sign a bill that allows a fair and equitable process for all working Virginians. Thank you. Let's just finish the job.
Well said, Athena. And next, we're going to take it to Harry Sabo, who will be speaking on behalf of Cecilia Parks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harry Sabo. I'm president of United Campus Workers. We are graduate students, staff, adjuncts, and tenured and non-tenured faculty. We stand with the Public Sector Coalition in calling for the legislature to reject Governor Spanberger's proposed revisions to the bill. United Campus Workers has been fighting to correct the historic injustice committed in the 1940s when the UVA Hospital Employees Union was busted by the governor of the state in collusion with their university president. I would like to read you remarks from the chair of our Political Coalition and Policy Committee, Cecilia Parks, who cannot be here today. Cecilia has worked tirelessly for the passage of collective bargaining. I urge lawmakers to do what's right for Cecilia and for the hundreds of thousands of other workers like her who deserve a fair contract. Here's what she has to say. My name is Cecilia Parks, and I am a member of United Campus Workers of Virginia and a librarian at the University of Virginia. I stand with other public sector union members in calling on the General Assembly to reject the governor's anti-worker changes to the collective bargaining legislation passed this session. This is not a position we want to be in. We came into this year's General Assembly session hoping that this would be the year that Virginia's unjust ban on collective bargaining for all public sector workers would be lifted, giving people like me the freedom to decide to join a union and have a seat at the bargaining table. The bill that passed the General Assembly was not perfect. It excluded most higher education workers, including me, but it still represented a huge win for the people who provide essential public services to all Virginians. Unfortunately, rather than strengthening the bill that the General Assembly sent to her, the changes proposed by Governor Spanberger would undermine the ability of workers to negotiate strong contracts and improve their own working conditions and the services that they provide. In particular, putting many of the protections outlined in the bill into the hands of a regulatory process creates instability and insecurity for workers and institutions alike. I've seen the impact of uncertain federal and state regulatory environments at UVA when research funding is unexpectedly cut and university governance is subject to the whims of partisan politics. These changes and the atmosphere of fear that they create make it difficult for workers to do their jobs and for institutions to make long-term plans and steward resources responsibly. I hoped that today would be a day of celebration, of winning back rights and protections that were unjustly taken from workers like me decades ago. This is not the case this year, but we will continue fighting until we are able to celebrate the ability of every worker in Virginia to bargain collectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harry. Just really appreciate your remarks on behalf of Cecilia. I think that is all of our worker speakers today. So with that, I want to go ahead and open it to questions from press. We've got a lot of folks on today, so we're only going to take questions from reporters. If you have a question, either drop it into the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you. I'll just give you a second. And Joe Dodson from Courthouse News has a question. Joe.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for holding this press conference. I guess I was just wondering if someone could speak a little bit about negotiations with the governor. A couple weeks ago, we were there was talk of getting more people included in the legislation. Now we're going the opposite way. So if anyone could just speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, Joe. So I can say that conversations have been happening, and that we have kept an open door and have strived to keep an open line during this whole process, from before the session through the session now. And that remains to be true, but we are calling for a rejection of this substitute very clearly and asking the governor to sign this bill that the General Assembly passed and that has gone through a lot of public testimony and an entire legislative process.
Thank you.
And Michael O'Connor has a question.
I mean, just to follow up on that a bit, I think Spanberger obviously spent a day with a home care worker as a candidate, a member of SEIU Virginia was on her transition team, when she was inaugurated. She kind of spoke with SEIU very visibly in February while the legislative session was happening. And so just what kind of input did she get from the unions after, the bill passed and in terms of her amendments and her changes? And what would it mean, if she ultimately vetoes this bill?
Well, it would mean that 500,000 Virginia public sector workers would be continued to be denied a meaningful voice on the job that they've been denied for decades. And I think affordability is a big piece of it, to be able to bargain for fair wages and to sit down at a table and make a case to your employer about what you deserve. But it's also about being able to, several speakers I know Kurt spoke to, making sure that you can have your voice heard on serious workplace issues like understaffing and the ability to deliver strong, continue to deliver, and deliver even better public services. Which is also a public safety issue, and it's an issue of how we're educating our children and taking care of our streets. And so that's what it would mean. Uh, I hope we don't get to that point. I would, our call is for the governor to sign this bill. And I think we've made our case, and we're making it publicly, and we'll continue to.
I mean, do the unions feel like they were able to give her a lot of input about the changes that she made, or did they come out of the blue?
I don't want to speak too much to the process. I can say that we have worked collectively on this legislation for 6 years, fighting alongside legislators. Legislators have certainly made ourselves available to answer, any questions that the or concerns that the administration may have had. Um, and so the changes, particularly changes that were that sweeping, I think were a bit of a surprise. All right. Any other questions? All right. I don't see any in the chat, and I don't see any hands up. Marcella, do you see anybody who's got their hands up or have a question in the chat?
No, I think that's everybody.
All right. Well, look, we really appreciate you all joining. I know this was a tight turnaround call, but we feel it was an important call. So if you do have follow-up questions after this, then please feel free to reach out to me, and we would be happy to connect. Thanks, everybody.